Trump takes a day trip to Camp David for a meeting with White House staff about border security as the partial government shutdown hits day 16 with no deal on the horizon. Good evening, I'm John Scott. You're watching the Fox Report. The president urges Democrats to end the partial government shutdown. This as Vice President Mike Pence leads a second day of talks between White House officials and congressional aides. The main bone of contention is still funding for the president's border wall. And President Trump says he might declare a national emergency, which would allow him to use military funding to build it.
We're looking at a national emergency because we have a national emergency. Just read the papers. We have a crisis at the border of drugs, of human beings being trafficked all over the world. They're coming through. And we have an absolute crisis, and of criminals and gang members coming through. Government workers want to see the border taken care of.
We have Fox News team coverage of this story. Brian Yennis will have the latest on the shutdown's impact on Americans. But we begin with Kevin Corke, who's live at the White House right now. Kevin?
John, good evening. As we prepare for the coming week, it is absolutely clear the White House is prepared to move into the next phase of its negotiations to somehow end this partial government shutdown. And I can tell you this, if you go to Twitter, one thing is absolutely manifestly clear. The president wants his wall, and he says the wall is coming. Now, that declaration comes amid the ongoing negotiations over border security funding, as you pointed out, as the partial shutdown nears its 17th day. Funding was, of course, part of the 2019 agenda discussed by the president and his senior cadre at Camp David this afternoon, after which he confirmed what material a border barrier would be made of, if, that is, a deal can be struck to fund it.
So we've been in touch with a lot of people, and I informed my folks to say that we'll build a steel barrier. Steel. It'll be made out of steel. It'll be less obtrusive and it'll be stronger. But it'll be less obtrusive, stronger, and we're able to use our great companies to make it by using steel. So we're going to be doing a steel barrier, and that gives us great strength at the border.
So while the president spent much of the day in Maryland, the vice president was back here in Washington meeting with Democrat congressional staffers at a working session over at the Eisenhower Executive Office building, which is, as you know, adjacent to the White House, about which the president said this on Twitter. Vice President Mike Pence had a had a productive meeting with the Schumer-Pelosi representatives today. Many details of border security were discussed. We are now planning a steel barrier rather than concrete. It is both stronger and less obtrusive. You heard the president actually mention that earlier. He goes on to say, good solution and made in the USA. However, Democrats over on Capitol Hill, John, are determined to keep the government shut down as long as it takes to keep the president from getting funding for a wall.
The Speaker has awesome powers, but if the President of the United States is against governance and doesn't care whether people's needs are met, or that public employees are paid, or that we can have a legitimate discussion, then we have a problem, and then we have to take it to the American people.
Sources tell Fox News tonight, John, that the outreach to congressional Democrats will continue tomorrow as they look for a pathway forward to end this shutdown, which nears now 17 days, John.
All right, Kevin Corke at the White House. Thank you, Kevin. Hundreds of thousands of federal workers are feeling the financial pinch and going without pay as the government shutdown heads into its third week. Some Democratic lawmakers say they're willing to discuss what's needed to address border security and immigration, but only after the shutdown ends.
The government must reopen immediately. I mean, it's having real consequences, not only to the federal workers, but to the country in terms of food stamps, in terms of tax refunds, in terms of safety at the airports with the TSA. I mean, there are real consequences to a prolonged shutdown.
Brian Yennis is here now with more. Brian?
John, January 11th is the first payday that's scheduled for federal employees covering the 2-week pay period during this 16-day government shutdown. These federal workers cannot get their paychecks until this shutdown is over. And the bills are starting to come in, even though they will be due back pay when it's all said and done. But the fact is, some federal employees like Danielle Stewart are applying for unemployment because they can't go and they can't afford to go without pay.
Border wall, fine. Not a problem. I mean, they do it, they don't. Not a problem. All I want to do is make sure that the people in my family, the people I love, the people I know are taken care of.
Dozens of government agencies and 9 major departments are not receiving funding. These departments include Agriculture, Commerce, Justice, Homeland Security, Transportation, the State Department, and more. And according to the government, more than 380,000 federal workers have been furloughed, meaning these employees cannot come into work and will be without pay during the duration of the shutdown. More than 450,000 federal workers are working, but without pay. They are considered essential personnel. This includes FBI agents and TSA workers. The Transportation Security Administration acknowledged yesterday there is an increase in the number of baggage and passenger screeners at airports nationwide calling out sick. A union official said 150 TSA workers called out sick at JFK Airport in New York Friday. Call-outs tripled at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. The TSA says there's been minimal impact on wait lines so far. We shall see. Meantime, some private local businesses in Oklahoma depend on federal employees traveling and spending their money, so they're saying that they can't take much of this any longer.
It's just a matter of survival. It's a matter of surviving as a business. How long can we keep this up? If it lasts 2-3 months, not only are we going to go out of business, a lot of our competitors are going to go out of business as well.
Most national parks are still at least partially opened, and it's allowing visitors in. The problem is park staffs are not working. There are reports of human feces, overflowing garbage, illegal off-roading, uncleaned restrooms in parks nationwide. The Washington Post is reporting the National Park Service is taking the unprecedented step of using entrance fees to pay for some of this desperate maintenance that is now needed. And all of this, John, as it's tax season. More than $140 billion in tax refunds are now at risk of being frozen or delayed if this government shutdown starts to go into February.
We'll see how long it lasts. I know you'll be watching it.
Yeah, that's
Brian
right.
Yennis, thank you. Well, a back and forth on Twitter between 2 Capitol Hill lawmakers turns ugly. Republican House Minority Whip Steve Scalise and freshman Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez got into the exchange over the New York Democrats' call for tax hikes on top earners to fund a proposed new Green Deal. Garrett Tenney tells us what happened next.
This is likely the beginning of many debates over Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's Green New Deal. Her proposal aims to tackle climate change and income inequality by generating 100% of the nation's power from renewable sources, eliminating all industrial greenhouse gas emissions, and paying for it by raising taxes on the wealthiest Americans to a marginal rate as high as 70%. That is nearly double the current top tax rate after Republicans cut it a year ago. And on Twitter, House Minority Whip Steve Scalise criticized Ocasio-Cortez's proposal, saying it would, quote, take away 70% of your income and give it to leftist fantasy programs. The freshman Congresswoman fired back, tweeting, "You're the GOP Minority Whip. How do you not know how marginal tax rates work?" Some of her followers also replied by referencing the 2017 shooting in which Scalise nearly lost his life, including one who wrote, "She's got better aim than the shooter, James Hodgkinson, that's for sure." With that, Scalise ended the back and forth, writing, "Happy to continue this debate on the floor of the People's House, but it's clearly not productive to engage here with some of your radical followers. Hashtag stay classy." There is certain to be a lot of debate about this in the months and years ahead. The Green New Deal is a priority for the progressive wave of freshman lawmakers that just took office, so they plan to push forward on Capitol Hill as well as on the campaign trail, at least on the Democratic side, in 2020. John?
Garrett Tenney reporting from Washington. Thank you. The Pentagon confirms a key figure in the bombing of the USS Cole was killed during a U.S. airstrike in Yemen last week. The U.S. believes Jamal al-Badawi helped coordinate the attack in October 2000 on the U.S. destroyer in the Yemeni port of Aden. 17 American sailors were killed, dozens more injured. U.S. Central Command tweeting it has confirmed a precision strike killed al-Badawi on New Year's Day. Retired Navy Commander Kirk Lippold, one of the former commanders of the USS Cole, will join us later in the Fox Report with his reaction. As the U.S. prepares to pull military personnel out of Syria, National Security Advisor John Bolton visiting Israel today. He's there to try to assure America's ally that withdrawal depends on a total victory over the remnants of ISIS and Turkey ensuring the safety of the Kurds fighting the Islamic State. Trey Yingst has more on that from Jerusalem.
John, President Trump's national security advisor, John Bolton, met today with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, saying that the United States will not pull troops out of Syria as quickly as expected. Bolton indicating to reporters in Jerusalem Sunday that the Trump administration will wait for assurances from Turkey about the fate of U.S.-backed Kurdish fighters. Critics of President Trump said he was abandoning the Kurds after his recent decision on Syria. The national security advisor adding that ISIS will also be completely defeated before the United States withdraws. Trump administration officials said over the weekend that part of Bolton's visit to Jerusalem was meant to ensure the Israelis that President Trump will not rush the withdrawal like he had previously indicated. Just last week, President Trump extended his timeline from 30 days to 4 months. Now the timeline appears to be open-ended with Bolton's new comments. Some troops will reportedly remain in Syria, and others will be moved to Iraq even once U.S. troops return from the region. Following his visit to Israel, Bolton will head to Turkey to meet with leadership in Ankara about the U.S. withdrawal and desire to protect YPG Kurdish fighters from a large-scale Turkish military operation. During a press conference in Jerusalem, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu announced that he and Bolton will travel tomorrow to the Golan Heights. The Israelis have reportedly asked the United States to recognize the Golan Heights as part of Israel. John?
Trey Yingst. Trey, thank you. President Trump talked to reporters about a second possible summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un earlier today. He says discussions between the two sides are underway.
We're negotiating a location. It will be announced probably not in the not-too-distant future. They have made it very clear. In fact, they've actually said to the media that they would like to meet. And they do want to meet, and we want to meet, and we'll see what happens. But the sanctions remain, but I will tell you, we are doing very well with North Korea.
The first summit took place last June in Singapore. Chairman King said in a New Year's Day speech that he is ready to meet again with President Trump, but that North Korea might have to change its approach if the U.S. continues to push ahead with sanctions. An arrest made in the shooting death of a young Texas girl. Eric Black Jr. faces a charge of capital murder for allegedly killing 7-year-old Jasmine Barnes in a drive-by shooting 1 week ago in Houston. Jeff Paul reports from our Los Angeles bureau with more on a case with a major twist. Jeff.
John, investigators say their big break in the case came in the form of a tip forwarded to them from activist Sean King. The information resulted in the arrest of 20-year-old Eric Black Jr. He's now facing a capital murder charge. Investigators say Black admitted to taking part in the shooting, identifying him as the driver. Authorities wouldn't confirm the arrests of any other suspects, but say they are looking for more. The Harris County Sheriff's Office believes Jasmine and her family were innocent victims, and they don't believe they were the intended target and were possibly shot as a result of mistaken identity.
This just went down very quickly when the gunfire erupted. You're talking about small children. They witnessed something very traumatic. And it's very likely that the last thing they did see was that, indeed, that red truck and that driver that was in that truck, and that's what they remembered last.
Initially, officials were looking for a white suspect after receiving reports from eyewitnesses, some saying the shooting might have been racially motivated. Authorities now saying that's not the case. But Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee addressed that, saying it's important to point out that the community did not divide.
They listened to the process of law and order, and they supported the sheriff and all of the law enforcement in their efforts. That should be the story going from this county and this city, that Jasmine's life was so important that no one tried to take the law in their own hands.
Investigators now believe the truck that was originally identified was likely a person who wasn't involved and just happened to be driving in the area at the time of the shooting, but they'd still like to speak with that driver, saying whatever they witnessed could help them. John?
Jeff Paul reporting live from Los Angeles. Thank you. The 16-day shutdown standoff continues with no end in sight. So what's it going to take? We'll wrap up all the day's reaction from lawmakers on Capitol Hill. Plus, the brother of an American citizen detained in Moscow on suspicion of spying speaks out about his family's ordeal.
I can't think of anything in particular that would have caused the Russian government to want to detain him, and particularly on espionage charges.
Hunted down Al-Qaeda operative Jamal al-Badawi was killed during U.S. airstrikes in Yemen last week. He is believed to have helped coordinate the 2000 attack that claimed the lives of 17 American sailors and injured dozens more. Retired Navy Commander Kirk Lippold, a former commander of the USS Cole, who was on board the ship at the time of the bombing, joins us now. Commander Lippold, I'm sure the name Jamal al-Badawi has haunted you for a couple of decades now, nearly. What was your reaction when you heard he was killed?
Well, I'll be honest, at first I was guardedly optimistic because, as is usual, you want to make sure that you have confirmation of the how and who got the confirmation. Once the president came out, however, I think that the crew and I and the families felt a deep sense of gratification. So very happy that this occurred.
Let me read what the president tweeted out about this attack, which came on New Year's Day, incidentally. He writes, "Our great military has delivered justice for the heroes lost and wounded in the cowardly attack on the USS Cole. We have just killed the leader of that attack, Jamal al-Badawi. Our work against al-Qaeda continues. We will never stop in our fight against radical Islamic terrorism." I know that you have been pressing for justice for the victims of the attack and their families. Does this amount to justice in your view?
For one individual, absolutely yes. It's nice to know that we still have people serving in our government who are willing to invest the time, the intelligence assets, and the ordnance to make sure that those that kill or harm Americans around the world meet their justice, even if it's 18 plus years. But we're still waiting for justice for the mastermind of the entire plot against USS Cole, Abd al-Rahim al-Nashiri, who is down in Guantanamo Bay awaiting a military commission. He still needs to be held accountable. So until that chapter is fully closed, there's still some loose ends hanging out there for the crew and families, and for me, as well as the American people.
There were a number of people indicted as a result of the attack. Have they all been either killed or located in some way?
Well, in many ways, you had a lot of bit players that contributed to what happened in the attack on USS Cole. Some of them received a little bit of justice. Overall, I think it was unsatisfactory. You had a Yemeni government that was, at worst, they were sympathetic. At best, they in fact aided and abetted in the attack in many ways. But nonetheless, there's been some sense of justice. The fact that we're going after the ringleaders, the fact that we're still willing years, and as you said, almost 2 decades later, to hold these people accountable is an important signal. You harm or you kill an American, it's U.S. policy that we will hunt you down and we will either capture you or kill you. And the fact that we're willing to do it this far on really is a strong signal to terrorists around the world that we're going to come after you.
And for those who have carried out attacks on U.S. personnel or facilities, or maybe are planning attacks on U.S. personnel or facilities, when they hear what happened to Jamal al-Badawi, it has to give them some pause.
I would certainly hope so, because the bottom line is, while they may want to be a martyr, they also have families, they have loved ones, but the United States is going to find you and hold you accountable if you harm or kill Americans. This was a very strong signal that after 18 years, we're still willing to come after you, track you, and find you.
Take us back to that day, the moment the explosion went off. What went through your mind?
Well, we had pulled into Yemen for a brief stop for fuel. We had been refueling for about 45 minutes. There was a thunderous explosion. You could feel all 505 feet and 8,400 tons of guided missile destroyer violently thrust up into the right. And within seconds, even though the announcing system no longer worked, the crew knew we had been attacked. They fell back on their training without anyone telling them what had happened, where to go, what to do, and they set about saving the ship. Within a little over an hour, USS Cole was stable, and as a testament to how well they were trained, we evacuated 33 wounded off the ship that first day, and of those 33 that we got off in 99 minutes, 32 had survived. While it is tragic that we still lost 17 sailors and ultimately 37 wounded, others would be wounded and be awarded the Purple Heart. They saved their ship, they saved their shipmates, and to this day, every single one of them remain my heroes.
They were a credit to the Navy and to the U.S. Let's hope that those 17, the families of those 17 who were killed, can take some solace in this news. Commander Kirk Lippold, former commander of the Cole, thank you.
Thank you, John.
Well, the brother of an American detained in Russia pleading his case. David Whalen telling Fox and Friends this morning he can't think of anything that would have caused the Russian government to arrest his brother Paul, a retired U.S. Marine, on suspicion of espionage, and that Moscow has been slow to explain.
The Russian government hasn't given any details about why Paul was detained. They haven't given any details about what the charges are. The Criminal Act 276 is extraordinarily vague, at least in the English interpretation I read. It's still very, very early stages as far as even just helping him to get things like toilet paper and his eyeglasses in jail. I think it's going to be a slow process, and I understand that Secretary Pompeo is both engaged in Paul's difficulty and also aware of that there's not a lot of detail yet.
Meantime, Russia's foreign ministry says it's too early to discuss an exchange between Whalen and alleged Russian spy Maria Butina, who is currently in U.S. custody. The White House says Democrats are happy to keep the partial government shutdown going.
It takes two to tango in this town. I could just as easily say that it's the Democrats' refusal to give the necessary money for border security that is the cause of the shutdown. The Democrats, for better or for worse, think that they are winning this battle politically.
Both sides appear far from reaching a deal on border wall funding. Which will be the first to blink? Plus, it's not just the southern border that shows concerns as illegal crossings rise at our northern border as well. What we're learning just ahead.
We experienced kind of an unprecedented volume of traffic for the entirety of the sector, really, but particularly my station, some 400% increase in the number of apprehensions.
We're at loggerheads still. We're at an impasse, and I was hoping it would not be this way, but it is. We could settle it. We should, but this has become a political circus. A lot of people on both sides are calling names and so forth. We got to quit the political posturing and get down to rational thinking, rational discussions.
Alabama Senator Richard Shelby says he and his colleagues need to get to work and put an end to the partial government shutdown. I'm John Scott, and this is the Fox Report. It's the bottom of the hour. And if you're just joining us, President Trump and Republicans have held firm on demands for that $5.5 billion for the border wall. They say Democrats have to accept the fence to end the standoff, but they aren't budging either. Ellison Barber has more from Washington. Ellison.
Good evening, John. The chairwoman of the House Appropriations Committee, Democratic Representative Nita Lowey, released the text of 4 individual bills to immediately reopen parts of the federal government. The House is expected to start considering them this week. However, you will remember that legislation did pass the House earlier this week. That legislation has not moved, and the Senate is not expected to take it up.
What we voted for last Thursday were Republican bills, all Republican bills, no Democratic bill, and we took them as they were passed the Senate. We're going to do the same thing this week. I would hope that Mitch McConnell, as the leader of the United States Senate, would represent the Congress of the United States.
I think we'll have offers on the table when we find somebody that's not crazy to deal with. We're not going to put any offers on the table as long as people in charge of these negotiations accuse all of us who want a wall of being a racist and see our Border Patrol agents as gassing children. Until you can get that crowd put to the sidelines, I don't see anything happening.
Democrats continue to say the shutdown needs to end before anything gets resolved on the border issue. Only a handful of Republicans agree with that, a few in the House, a couple in the Senate. Most say this is an issue of national security and that they believe they need that $5+ billion right now. As for the president's idea of going around Congress and declaring a national emergency in order to build the wall, lawmakers speaking out today seem to be against that, regardless of their political party.
Nobody wants him to invoke it, and I don't believe the president wants to invoke it.
This would be a terrible use of Department of Defense dollars.
I don't think the president has that authority.
He could, and that gives him more power. But what I'd like to see us do it through the Congress, through the appropriation process. Do it right, because most of the Democrats have voted to secure the wall. A lot of money.
If Harry Truman couldn't nationalize the steel industry during wartime, this president doesn't have the power to declare an emergency and build a multi-billion-dollar wall on the border. So that's a non-starter.
Democrats and Republicans disagree on key aspects of today's meeting. A Republican aide told Fox News Democrats received a, quote, detailed breakdown list of the administration's proposals for border security. A Democratic official told Fox News they asked for a full budget justification for the administration's position yesterday, and they say they did not receive it today. President Trump called the meeting a productive one. Democrats say no progress was made. John?
Allison Barber in Washington. Thanks. For more on this, let's bring in David Mark, news editor for the Washington Examiner. David, the two sides seem very far apart on this border wall, fence, whatever you want to call it. Do you see any progress, any movement?
Absolutely not. We are now more than 2 weeks into this partial government shutdown. And as was just noted in the report, both sides are dug in for various reasons. Each think they have the political advantage. At this point, they're not budging, and we can expect to see a lot more of the stalemate for at least days to come, perhaps weeks to come.
So do you see one side having an advantage right now?
Well, Democrats have drawn a proverbial line in the sand. Nancy Pelosi, the new House Speaker, has said there will be no wall. It's pretty difficult to walk back from that. The administration has given perhaps a smidge of wiggle room in which they've said maybe it could be called a fence, steel slats, something or other of that nature. It's possible both sides could eventually reach some kind of wink-wink, nod-nod agreement where it's over semantics. Both claim victory and nothing really happens that they don't like, but we will see. We're still a ways off from that.
Okay, but what is there that Democrats could offer Republicans, for instance, that would get both sides back to the negotiating table?
Democrats could perhaps up the amount of money they are putting forward for what they call border security. So far, congressional Democrats have said they are willing to give out $1.3 billion for border security. Maybe they go up to 1.4, 1.5 billion. But again, it's tough to walk back saying there will be no wall. And now we get into other solutions like emergency situations that the president is putting forward.
What about some kind of deal for the so-called dreamers? Most Democrats seem to think that they deserve to be allowed to stay in the country, and a lot of Republicans do as well. It would seem like that would be a negotiating point that the White House could seize upon.
Democrats have been a bit coy about that, whether they would accept that kind of approach. 6 months ago, a year ago, that kind of deal was almost certainly on the table. Now, though, Democrats feel like they have the upper hand. For whatever reason, they feel like they're winning this battle. Democrats in Congress also say that the White House has not been willing to follow through on such a deal, so they're not even going to go down that path. Whatever the truth is, that's how Democrats are saying it.
But Nancy Pelosi's, especially incoming members, have made some PR blunders that are getting a lot of attention and could sour the public mood on some of the Democratic desires. Could they not?
Well, certainly, Democrats in Congress, the leadership there has had some real headaches. You had a member on the very first day that they were in office using a profanity about the president, talking about impeachment. You had another member talking about taxing the highest earning Americans at 70% tax rates. Not the kind of messaging that House Democrats really want. At the same time, when it comes down to it, those members and others on the far left of the party are probably going to vote with the leadership on whatever is put forward, so that remains to be seen.
But those members are getting a lot of attention right now.
Well, certainly, they are the face of the party, whether House Democrats want that or not. The thing is, they only are one vote. All members like that do, first-term members can do, is offer legislation. They have little clout. They don't even have committee assignments yet. They're not in a position to actually influence legislation, but they will cause a lot of headaches for their party leadership.
So Rashida Tlaib and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the two incoming members that we're talking about, might find themselves taken to the woodshed or might find themselves with committee assignments they're not exactly excited about as a result of what they have said that maybe doesn't exactly please Nancy Pelosi.
Well, so far there doesn't seem to be a lot of punishment or retribution. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi was asked about this in a televised interview recently, and she said, "I'm not in the censorship business," or something to that effect. With Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, we don't know what punishment, if any, there is. Of course, she has every right as a member of Congress to offer that proposal. Whether or not that's what Democratic leaders want to be talking about is another issue, but there's really a limited amount that leaders can do to actually muzzle them and stop them from saying anything.
David March, thanks very much.
Thank you.
So, with so much attention on President Trump's attempts to build a wall along the southern border, concerns have grown over our northern border with Canada, as illegal crossings there are on the rise. Molly Lyon explains.
A new multi-million-dollar point of entry in Derby Line, Vermont welcomes visitors to the U.S. from Canada. But it's the recent increase in illegal aliens sneaking across this northern border, the longest between two nations in the world, that is raising concern.
Wherever they can try it, they will.
Newport Station patrol agent in charge, Richard Ross, works the Swanton sector, which includes 295 miles of border. 2018 has been very busy.
We experienced kind of an unprecedented volume of traffic for the entirety of the sector, really, but particularly my station, some 400% increase in the number of apprehensions.
A full accounting of the 2018 numbers for the entire northern border has yet to be released. But in fiscal year 2017, the U.S. Border Patrol reports 3,027 people were apprehended. As thousands of additional troops line the southern border in response to the migrant caravans, Canadian immigration policy allows Mexicans to enter without travel visas. From Mexico City, a flight to Montreal can cost less than $400, and the city is only about an hour's drive from America's border.
The perception is that it's going to be a much safer and easier place to cross than is the southern border. So where there's a way that an avenue can be exploited, transnational criminal organizations will absolutely exploit every avenue that they can.
An influx of technology, including sensors and cameras, keeps a watchful eye, and the U.S. is seeking to expand that vigilance. Phil Eterno's family has farmed this land in Derby Line with a border-spanning view since the end of World War II. A recent letter from the Department of Homeland Security gives notice that times have changed.
They want to put up some device up on top of my hill. We need to have protection, because it's not all the good people that cross it.
Within 100 miles of this international border, federal law gives the U.S. Border Patrol the authority to set up checkpoints. The agency reports that several in New York held earlier this year led to the arrest of human smugglers. But multiple members of Vermont's congressional delegation have pushed back against efforts to hold the checks here in the Green Mountain State. In Derby Line, Vermont, Molly Lyon, Fox News.
The Monday morning commute could be ugly in Southern California after mudslides shut down a major highway, and more rain could be on the way. The forecast coming up. Plus, a mysterious bright light streaking across the sky. Astronomers now believe they know what it was. That's ahead.
Come on, baby. It drives me crazy. It's just great balls of fire.
Hammers the west, unleashing floods and mudslides in Southern California that shut down the Pacific Coast Highway for hours. And more wet weather is on the way across the country. So how's it going to impact you? Adam Klotz is here with the forecast. Adam.
Hey there, John. You know what? That wet weather we're talking about on the West Coast, now at least in some places beginning to work into the middle of the country, kind of rounds of systems working their way in. Now rain across portions of Missouri, that's the Kansas City area. And then stretching farther north where the temperature's a little bit colder, we're seeing some snow across the northern plains, the upper Midwest. But that is just one of several rounds of rain. And those folks who got it yesterday across portions of Northern California, unfortunately, that's continuing even right now as we speak. Times of very heavy rain. The higher elevations, this is turning into snow. They've seen a lot of snow in some of these locations. So future radar takes the secondary system again marching across the country, and then this first one begins to work its way more into the Midwest tomorrow. Still seeing some of that snow on the northern edge of this, but across most of the country, just too warm for this to be snow. Some bit of a cold rain. Still, though, if you're back along the West Coast, this winter storm watch and warning, it's been in place since yesterday as we saw that initial round bring a lot of snow. Still, there are areas, everything in the pink here, where we're looking at warnings. You could see an additional 1 to 2 feet of snow. Yesterday, they got that same amount, so we're already adding to areas that have seen a lot of snowfall. Everything here in the white areas, particularly at some of those higher elevations, you're getting up to 1 foot, in some cases 2 feet. And then with that, you're still seeing places right along the coastline where there has been mudsliding. Mudslides, you could be talking about another 2 to 3 inches of rain, all with this very big system that's going to continue to kind of work its way there onto the West Coast. I showed you, though, if this system begins to work its way into the middle of the country, it has just been too warm for big snow systems there for the Plain States. These are your current temperatures, 62 degrees right now in Kansas City. This is way above the seasonal average. This isn't going to shift a lot here in the next couple of days. So we go from our forecasted highs here on Sunday, where temperatures are in the 60s, kind of spreads out more. Tomorrow, Chicago getting up to 53 degrees. It lingers a little bit, maybe back to normal by the middle of this upcoming week, John. But these winter systems that folks out west are dealing with, that's going to be a problem here throughout the rest of this weekend into early this next week.
Big problem in California after all those fires.
Yep.
Adam Klotz. Adam, thank you. A dazzling light in the sky, thrilling people who saw it across New Zealand. This bright fireball streaked across the sky on Saturday. Witnesses say they heard a loud boom and a rumble before seeing the thing break in two. Stargazers hit social media, excited at what they thought was a meteorite. But the Auckland Astronomical Society today says it was actually a Russian satellite burning up on re-entering Earth's atmosphere. We're just an hour away from the Golden Globes kicking off award show season. Here's a live look at the red carpet outside. So who takes home the awards? Widely seen as predicting the Oscar winners. We're live in Hollywood next.
There's no business like show business, like no business I know. Everything about it is appealing. Everything that traffic will...
Award season kicks off tonight with the Golden Globes. Here's a live look at the red carpet outside as the Hollywood Foreign Press Association gets ready to hand out the TV and film honors widely seen as a sort of blueprint for the Oscars. So let's talk about who's expected to win big with Michael Tamero. He's live in Hollywood in the middle of all the excitement. Michael.
Hey, John. Well, the stars are making their way down the red carpet, and the champagne is already flowing as Hollywood gets ready to kick off award season tonight. The best way they know how, by throwing a star-studded party.
It's award time!
The Globes and upcoming Screen Actors Guild Awards celebrate the best in TV and film, but most of the pressure falls heavily on big screen features. A nomination or win can carry its weight in gold.
Campaigning is so important right now for all of these movies. We are in the heat of campaign season. I mean, there are war rooms being developed right now trying to figure out how to win these awards.
Tell me something, girl.
Some frontrunners this year include A Star is Born, The Favorite, Black Klansman, Roma, Bohemian Rhapsody, Mary Poppins Returns, Green Book, and Vice, with a Globe-leading 6 nominations.
When you have power, people will always try to take it from you. There's a lot of amazing material that's produced. There's a lot of amazing performances, so it's an amazing compliment to be included in this way.
It is your time. And with so much talk about recognizing diversity, both Black Panther and Crazy Rich Asians have shared in the wealth.
Hollywood is definitely improving in terms of the diversity front. And Crazy Rich Asians, like, who didn't love that movie?
Love A Star is Born.
Thank you.
And John, I'm joined by Sam Elliott. His movie A Star is Born is nominated tonight. What is it like to be a part of this movie?
No, it's incredible to be part of it. To see it being embraced by the public, is a wonderful thing.
And you're getting your Hollywood Walk of Fame star on Monday?
I'm going to put my hands in boots in the forecourt at Grauman's, so that'll be fun.
Congratulations. Good luck tonight.
Thank you. Appreciate it very much. Take care.
Well, John, I mean, it doesn't get better than that. What can I say?
No guy in Hollywood has a better voice than Sam Elliott. That's cool. All right. Thanks very much. Michael Tamero, live in Hollywood. Meantime, reportedly, there will be no change of heart for Kevin Hart on the Oscars after all. Deadline reports the comic actor will not consider hosting this year's Academy Awards because he doesn't want to be a distraction. Hart backed out last month, days after he was announced as host, after some old homophobic tweets of his resurfaced. He apologized on The Ellen Show the other day. She called for the Academy to reinstate him as host. The Academy reportedly is looking for another host, or possibly several, for the February 24th show. They'd better hurry up. Well, you can spread it on toast or pancakes, bake it into brownies, or just eat it by the spoonful. Yes, Nutella has many uses and many fans, which must be why it inspired Costco to redefine the idea of selling it in bulk. Just wait till you hear how they have supersized the spread. Next.
Sweet dreams are made of these. Who am I to disagree? I travel the world.
On this first Sunday of January, January 6th, I'm John Scott. Thank you for joining us. Fox News Sunday starts now.